We have to turn to our next story because it's such an interesting time in English football in that Chelsea is sold for very specific reasons, but sold nonetheless. And then the two biggest clubs in English football, two of the biggest clubs in world football, are put up for sale within 100 days of each other. The Liverpool sale is promptly withdrawn. The Manchester United sale is not creating perhaps the frenzy that the Glazers might have hoped. Matt Slater of The Athletic often covers these business of football stories, and along with several colleagues has written about the Manchester United takeover, stage 2 in The Athletic. Stage 2 makes it sound very ominous, I have to say, Matt, but we're at stage 2 nonetheless. It's a behind the scenes feel for what's going on. Could you just address the broader point I made for a moment? The Chelsea sale is very specific. I guess the Newcastle sale should be lumped into this broader story at the moment. And then we have the Liverpool, we're for sale now, we're not for sale, and the Glazers situation as well. Why, I wonder, did Henry and the Glazers, who I presume know their business, why did they think to themselves, now is the time?
That's a really good question. In fact, I'd almost throw a few more in the mix, because there was a real sense of turnover. Turnover of ownership in the Premier League. Burnley, of course, they got relegated, but they got bought at quite a high valuation. Southampton, West Ham, Daniel Kretinsky, a big Czech billionaire, bought into West Ham at a really high valuation. Then, of course, Newcastle, and then the big one, Chelsea. And there was a smaller one at Wolves as well, so that was a minority share. So there was an awful lot of interest, an awful lot of M&A, merger and acquisition activity in the Premier League. And there was this sense that new ways of valuing franchises were sort of happening all the time, that North American sports, if you like, the kind of gold standard in terms of sports investments, because they don't have relegation, they share their revenues, big market, they share talent, so everyone almost gets to go to be good, gets to go at being good. And by and large, they're profitable, not all of them, but they're profitable. Certainly the NFL is very profitable. And there was this sort of sense, okay, well, look, football is a global game, bigger market, bigger, more eyeballs. We can do it better. Their TV deals, their international TV deals are really good. The wind was blowing in the Premier League's direction. Chelsea went at a revenue multiple. Now that is how sports franchises tend to be valued, of about 5 or 6 times. So 5 or 6 times its annual revenue, $2.5 billion. And that is sort of what National Hockey League, MLS teams, smaller NBA teams go for. So it was a big bump, because normally European football teams are going for 1.5, 2 times their revenue. So it's like, oh, right, new paradigm here. Suddenly, people are seeing our biggest clubs in the same way they view a big baseball team or an NFL team. And I think that got a lot of, particularly American owners of English European football teams, quite excited. It was like, I told you, we've been over here 10, 15 years. It's happening. Right, brilliant. They're starting to value our assets in the same way we value our assets at home. Great, maybe it's time to check out. And I think also think about Chelsea as well, is that I think people got maybe a little bit carried away, because it was definitely for sale. It was a very unusual. Big Six, definitely for sale with a deadline. So I think that kind of created real competitive tension in the auction, which is what you want. So Liverpool, Fenway Sports Group look at that. The Glazers, Manchester United look at that, and they think, do you know what? Maybe it's time to put, it's a bit like kind of putting your house on your market when you sort of see the neighbours down the road get a really good price. You're thinking, I wonder what we're worth. And then I think there's some other factors as well. They're perhaps a little bit disappointed by Project Big Picture. Both of them were involved in that, and also the European Super League. Maybe wondering if, the last big international rights deal, maybe that's going to be the last big leap for a while. Domestic rights flat. So I think there are a few things going on, right? Long story short, that was last year. Things have changed. Well, actually, it was the year before, wasn't it? Because we've just gone over into 2023. Yeah. The global economy isn't so good. Interest rates are going up, particularly in the States. They've leapt up. So we've had a decade of almost free money. Now the money costs something if you're going to borrow money. Just sort of like market sentiment as well. And I think also a sense that maybe Bowley and Clearlake overpaid for Chelsea.
Right.
And maybe we shouldn't be valuing Premier League football teams at 5 or 6 times their revenue. So look, that's a very sort of long answer, but that was what was going on when everyone was very excited about buying and selling Premier League teams. I think things have changed.
Okay, interesting. I'm just, by the way, if anyone's watching us as well as listening, I wasn't ignoring you. I was looking at the screen because Bayern Munich scored a goal, which was then, courtesy of VAR, ruled offside. So still 0-0 in that game. So just one quick last short question and all that. Todd Bowley, I would also presume, knows his business. How did he overvalue, and things have changed so quickly in the world, or was that part of the frenzy that you mentioned, which was around Chelsea?
Well, he would say he hasn't overpaid. In fact, they're running around telling people they've underpaid. They think they got an absolute steal there.
Right.
And in 10 years' time, Chelsea are going to be earning $1 billion, right? They're earning about 400, maybe 500 million now. They're going to double that.
Yeah.
And everyone's going to be begging, oh my God, what a genius decision that was to buy Chelsea, particularly when they build that new stadium and, blah, 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 blah. We're all streaming direct and they can start really monetizing their global fan base. So, and also he'll probably think as well that under Abramovich, they perhaps weren't working as hard commercially as they needed to, because, Abramovich was always good for it. So they think there's considerable upside at Chelsea.
Okay.
What I can tell you is the rest of the market, including many Americans, disagree. I think they just plain overpaid.
Okay, very interesting. So, Manchester United, in your piece, they're at stage 2. Stage 2 involves face-to-face talks with Rain, the same bank which handled the sale of Chelsea, interestingly. They're obviously the place to go. And so face-to-face talks, really, it seems we have 2 bidders. Everybody's pretty familiar with the 2 bidders. You say in your piece that what's happening at these meetings is the books are being opened. You can see what we're paying players. You can look at all our commercial deals, the cost of running the stadium, future TV earnings, you name it. It's a full disclosure. What's actually happening is, I suppose, the interesting question. What's going on here?
Because you're right, because that stuff is actually really boring. And you're going to hear and read a lot about things like data rooms and deep dives and due diligence and this idea of, kind of going through every contract and having face-to-face meetings actually with members of staff at Man United. So really understand the business. It sounds great, doesn't it?
Yeah.
This is just so basic, for buying and selling big companies. And you could probably do this. You could, because they've all got amazing teams. They could wrap this up in a week or so if they really wanted to. Certainly the Qataris, because they're kind of cash buyers. So, and don't forget, Man United are a publicly listed company. They float on the New York Stock Exchange, so they actually file really good, deep quarterly accounts. So, most of these people have got a pretty good sense of how much money Man United are turning over and how much they're spending. So this is all a great big smokescreen. This is a great big pause and a delay whilst Rain, who don't forget have told the Glazers they're going to get 10x, so 10 times revenue, just like an NFL team. Okay. And they're looking at these bids that are coming in at 6x. So not the great big premium on Chelsea because they're Man United. We're the biggest. If Chelsea got that, we've got to get even more, right? Because we're Man United. And they're looking at the bids that are in. You've got a Qatari bid who is clearly bid the most and is bidding with cash. Why would they bid against themselves? Who does that? They don't have to budge. Yeah. They've got Radcliffe, who is notoriously a value guy, who has pretty much done this for a living for 30, 40 years. It's how he built Ineos. His whole MO is around being the last bidder. When the others fall away, I'm the last one standing. So they've got 2 quite canny bidders who don't appear to be willing to start kind of getting into a ding-dong battle. Not yet. So Rain have got to find a third bidder, fourth bidder, whatever. They've certainly got to find a third bidder to breathe some life into it. And that is what's been going on. Okay.
And is there any sign of a third bidder?
Lots of rumours. There's been rumours from the beginning. Saudis, Singaporean group, maybe one of the losers from Chelsea. I think that was a pretty safe assumption, that one, actually. That it just hasn't happened. Or there'd be a regrouping of various US entrepreneurs who do want to buy into the Premier League. They've shown they want to buy into the Premier League and they haven't been able to do it yet. Maybe they get together, pretty much in the same way that we saw at Chelsea. It just hasn't happened. So I think what's happening at the moment is that Rain are desperate to sort of keep a third share open. Now, they would have had, I think, some interest from guys like, if anyone's getting a posse together, can you let them know that maybe I'm good for 100 million, 200 million? If anyone wants to build a syndicate, I'm over here. I think there's a little bit of that. And we already know, because a few weeks ago, it was revealed that Elliott, a hedge fund, and I think there are a few others out there, are also willing to lend people money. They're willing to lend the Glazers money if they choose to hold on and want to refinance the debt and want to build Old Trafford again. Or if they want to lend money to Radcliffe. So that I think is actually a more important part of the due diligence process, because those guys, hedge funds and private equity funds who lend money, do actually have more questions they need answering, because they have investment committees they have to go back to. They might only meet every 2-3 weeks. So even that actually can take place pretty fast. But I've got more time for that as this idea of, oh no, now we need to go into a completely different phase. And this is like unprecedented stuff. No, it's not unprecedented at all. These people are all advised by massive banks who literally do this for a living. So I think you've got Rain trying to keep that third share open for as long as they can. And you've got some of these debt guys who might have some questions they want answered from Manchester United. And that might affect the rate they lend at. Now, that's actually quite interesting, because I think Radcliffe has already made pretty clear that he wants to borrow some money to do this. If 2 or 3 funds want to get into a competition for this business, they might start competing with each other on interest. And he might go, brilliant, this is wonderful for me. This pause is wonderful. If people want my business, they want me to borrow from them, and they were offering 15% a month ago. Now they've looked at the books, maybe they can offer 13, 14. Yeah, great. Yeah.
It's all very interesting. And so the Qataris are cash buyers as well, as you mentioned. This is a weird cross between the Irish property market at its most neurotic, where, just keep buying, it doesn't matter, the price will only go up, nothing bad will ever happen, and Succession and Logan Roy screaming, get me another bidder. I want 6 billion. No blanking way am I going for 4.5. So I'm sure a lot of tension there. Sheikh Jassim is, you write in your piece in The Athletic, in the box seat. He's around 4.5 billion. He is willing to buy the entire club in cash, including the 31% of the company not owned by the Glazers, whereas Ratcliffe is proposing just to buy the Glazers shares, but in doing so he would give 4.3 billion. So in that sense...
See, this is important. This is important, right? So I think a lot of people have got confused by this. And it's largely because the media haven't explained it very well. So when these numbers are bandied around, that is their valuations of the club, right? So
not necessarily their bid.
Yeah, it's not necessarily the amount I'm going to give you.
Oh.
So even the Qataris are sort of saying, well, no, we think Man United is a 4.5. Well, it could be a tiny bit more, but let's call it 4.5 for argument's sake, £1 billion business. And actually, there's another bit to that. They're almost certainly talking about what is known as enterprise value. That is how people do this in M&As. So that is the price of your shares, your equity, plus your net debt. So you add the net debt, and that's pretty significant at United. It's about 650, let's call it, 700 million or so. So almost, if you want to be kind of intuitive about it, you almost knock that off.
Okay.
Right? So the 4.5 includes 700 million of debt. That is what they value the company at. Now, that's pretty simple if you're thinking about Qataris, because the Qatari is going to buy the lot and they want to kind of wipe the debt as well. So they really are talking in terms of 4.5 billion. Radcliffe's a bit different. He's valuing the company at 4.3, but he's actually only proposing to buy 69% of it. The Glazers shares.
Yes.
So he is actually, if you like, ponying up less money.
Yes, okay, interesting. Bayern Munich, as you were explaining that, have scored what will probably be a decisive goal. PSG, another one of those years in Europe, they're 2-0 down on aggregate, 1 on the night. So how committed are the Glazers to, we want that 6 billion, we will not budge?
Well, I wonder if that's another part of this due diligence process, where there's a sort of kind of reassessment of their expectations. So they've had people in their ear, including Rain, saying, do not sell for anything less than 6 billion, about 10x, like I said. And they originally were thinking, oh, maybe a bit more than that, 6 to 8 billion, which was ludicrous. No one believed that for a minute.
Yeah.
I think as this process has gone on, there's almost a sort of, I don't know if it's just wishful thinking, but I'm hearing increasingly that their new number's about 5.
Well, I would have thought being the most detested owners in world football would knock $1 billion off your ideal price.
But I mean,
they don't care.
The most thick skill, they don't care.
So at the Carabao Cup, as thousands of fans are screaming, "We're happy," but you guys, we still hate you so much. In person, they're like, whatever.
I was there, right, and I wasn't sat that far away from Avram Glazer. He looked like he was having a wonderful time. Okay. He really did.
He wasn't coughing up his prawn at the side of the fans.
No, not at all. And towards the end, as Man United sort of had it in the bag, the Glazers are out stuff got louder and louder and louder.
Yeah.
And as they were getting their medals, and Avram was very much in the picture there. He was sort of sat in front of Fergie and David Gill. Someone managed to get a Glazer out banner right underneath him. So even if he's this sort of blissfully chilled out, guy from Florida who just, I don't know what they're chanting. There was a banner right underneath him that he could not have missed. So this guy, this guy's, I don't know. Billionaires are different, right? He's not that bothered.
Yeah. He's not giving up $1 billion just because he's not popular, to be fair. So they're coming down to 5. That's interesting. Is your sense that this will be done, and if so, is it going to go the way of Qatar? Because without doing, and it's what's that book? Thinking Slow, Thinking Fast. Or something?
Yeah.
So in the part of our brain that's just computes a whole bunch very, very quickly.
Yeah.
Most of us who do not look at spreadsheets at all saw Glazers want to sell, Qatari's interest, done. Don't need to hear any more. We know which way this is going to go. Is after all your expertise applied, is our quick thought on it maybe the truth?
Yeah, no. Well, that was very much the reporting over here as well. And certainly that was the mood on Twitter. It was done and dusted. They'd be in by March.
Yeah.
Well, here we are, apparently in phase 2, and people are talking about phase 3 and phase 4 as well. Look, there's a few things to say there. One, it was never going to happen in March. People don't like buying football clubs in March because it's the worst time to buy a football club. So's April. They have no cash. You wait till May when the season ticket money starts to come in. They're kind of cash businesses. That gives you plenty of time to get in before the transfer window. You also kind of know where you are, where you're playing next season.
Okay.
Champions League, blah, blah, blah. So like May, I think, was always the sort of realistic time to do this. Look, if you'd have asked me a couple of weeks ago, I was leaning Qatar because, look, they made it really clear they wanted it. I wasn't sure back in December that they would, but as soon as they went, and they came out with this, cute way of creating separation from PSG, I thought, right, well, that'll probably get past UEFA, so that's going to clear that regulatory hurdle. Yeah, all right, they will probably get it, and they've been quite disciplined with their bid. I think they are very keen not to be seen as like pushovers anymore. Yeah, we'll just pay whatever it is, because I think they know that the next time they buy a hotel or invest in another business, they need to sort of stop that. They need to stop this Western perception. They're always going to say yes. I had the odds on the Glazers holding on have been growing for me.
Right.
They've been growing. The fact he came to the Carabao Cup final, the fact that, they didn't get the bids they wanted. They didn't get the kind of that competitive tension in the auction. Radcliffe is a sort of canny guy. He's not going to be bounced into anything. And it looks like the Qataris don't want to be bounced into anything either. I just thought they might hold on. They might go, let's ride Ten Hag for a bit. Let's see where this goes. We'll do it again in 3-4 years' time. Maybe Todd Bowley's right, and then we'll sell it for 7-8 billion. So I think I wouldn't want to put a pound on it, but the odds on them holding have gone up.
A lot of happy Manchester United fans to hear that, Matt.
Sorry.
What would the ramifications be for the market either way? Say it's sold for 5 billion. What does that do to John Henry's thinking? Or say it's not sold. What does that do to John Henry's thinking or beyond?
Right. If it's sold for 5 billion, I think that is quite a significant moment, again, because it's that sort of shifting up of how you value Premier League clubs. So that would be 8x. So that is kind of bottom end of what NFL franchises go for. So that is global sport saying the most valuable franchises you can buy are NFL teams, which hardly ever change hands, and really big Premier League ones. That's it. Those are the most valuable assets in global sport.
Nothing else gets to 8 times revenue.
No way. No way. I mean, maybe the New York Yankees, maybe the LA Dodgers, maybe the very best Golden State Warriors, the very best baseball teams, the very best basketball teams. The rest of them, no.
Yeah.
5, 6, 7, 4, whatever. And for the rest of global football, the rest of football, 2. Newcastle went for 2 times. That's that deal starting to look better and better. So I think that would be significant. It would be significant. And then of course you've got all the kind of geopolitical stuff as well. You've got Qatar in the Premier League. Well, I'm making a big assumption there that Qatar gets it. But if it goes for 5 billion, I think the most important thing would be this sort of setting of a new price level for the big boys.
And at a certain point, are we running out of petrostates here?
Well, yeah, because I think, Dubai has often been talked about. Dubai hasn't got the money for this. They got bailed out by Abu Dhabi a few years ago, and there just isn't a single sort of rich enough fund sort of person to sort of do this. There's some politics there in the UAE about going up against Abu Dhabi as well. Kuwait's similar. Kuwait's really, and Bahrain. Bahrain's been doing some interesting stuff in motorsport. Again, I think the Saudis bailed them out. So no, I think we have probably run out of petrostates. I guess what could happen is there are genuinely wealthy individual people in Saudi Arabia. So we could have more Saudi billionaires do this.
Yeah.
Though, of course, you're always going to have problems proving separation in a place that is so dominated by the state.
Yes.
But yes, I think there are more rich people in Saudi Arabia that could buy football clubs.
Okay. And a last thought, again, back to Irish property market level, I suppose.
Oh, yes.
For quite some years, people have said that, well, this bubble is going to burst eventually. And clearly, a lot of very smart people are looking at it and saying, no, this genuinely will just keep going up and up and up and up and up. What's your sense? Are there many out there that you speak to in your reporting predicting any kind of doom for top-level football anytime soon?
No, not yet. I mean, there's still an awful lot of interest, particularly from like big private equity money, so institutional money.
Yeah.
They want stakes, so they're more thinking minority stakes. They're really interested in like buying into leagues, buying up percentages of future media rights. So there people are still willing to bet on football, and the reason they're willing to bet on football is it is by far the world's most popular sport. And I often hear this. It's the world's most popular sport, despite not being the number one sport in the 3 biggest markets. So North America, China, and India to come, right? So that's if you think about that, that's pretty interesting. That it's got this sort of absolute dominance over the global conversation, has so many fans, but it still has room to grow, and it's growing fast in at least 2 of those 3 markets. So it's growing pretty well in India. It's doing okay in China. China's going a bit of obviously through a funny moment in terms of its economy, but it's growing really fast in North America, and they've got the World Cup to come. So there is, I think, optimism around the upside of football. And if you've talked yourself into that position, well, then it's actually a really easy leap to go, well, where would I be? Well, I'll be in the most popular league then, won't I? Because that's patently clear just on eyeballs and how much money they're earning from international rights. Well, I need to be in the Premier League then.
Yeah.
So that is why I think valuations in the Premier League are probably okay for a while. At some point, though, they've got to stop losing money. So,
Yeah. All very interesting. We'll see how it plays out. Can I throw you one last unconnected question, just very briefly?
Yeah.
And by all means, plead the fifth if you're not too sure. People, I think, will be vaguely aware of this court case between Live Golf and the PGA Tour.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So, effectively, the owners of Newcastle are also the owners of Live Golf, and they have said, well, we can't come into the courtroom and give evidence because we're Saudi Arabia. We're a state. Yeah. We're the royal family. Saudi Arabia's not going in and doing your court case. But by the same token, they have assured the Premier League, the exact same people, their argument is, we are separate from the state. We are not Saudi Arabia. We are completely different. So one of those 2 things can't be true.
I know.
Incredibly embarrassing for the Premier League.
Yeah.
Will anything come of this?
don't know. I mean, you're absolutely right. It's incredibly embarrassing for the Premier League. And other Premier League clubs have pointed this out.
Yeah.
Quietly. Hold on a minute. I thought you got written assurances.
Yeah. Legally binding.
Yeah, sorry, legally binding assurances that enabled you. Because the whole point, of course, was that should the Saudi state effectively, so maybe the Crown Prince, take the owners and directors test. Now, that would have been quite hard for not the reason that probably many of your listeners and viewers are thinking, oh, wait, because of Jamal Khashoggi. Well, that would have been a bit tricky as well. But more because they'd spent 3-4 years pirating beIN, digital piracy. They've been stealing Premier League's intellectual property as part of that Saudi versus Qatar diplomatic contretemps. Now that then miraculously ended. They made up, and suddenly that problem goes away. But if you take that to its sort of logical extension, well, hold on a minute. So the Public Investment Fund, right, is now the Sovereign Wealth Fund. Yeah, we kind of knew that. Oh, and they've got like 7 or 8 ministers on the board, and including the chair of it is Mohammed, bin Salman, the Crown Prince. And they've just been into an American court, almost trying to claim diplomatic immunity. Yeah. And no, but apparently Al Ramian, who runs the PIF and is a director, I think he might actually be the president of Newcastle. I can't remember now. Maybe the chairman at Newcastle, was almost saying, I can't possibly testify. You can't depose me because I'm a minister. Yeah. I'm effective. I have the same status as a minister in Saudi Arabia. So you can't do that. Well, maybe you can, and maybe you lot should take the owners and directors test. And I think that then puts Saudi Arabia in a really difficult spot. Now, are the Premier League, I don't know, how brave are they? Because bear in mind how much pressure they were placed under by the British government during the entire hold-up over the takeover. I know you've got your rule book. Yeah, I know they're stealing your intellectual property, and I know they shouldn't do the digital piracy. I know that was very naughty of them. But by the way, we need to be really friendly with Saudi Arabia because we've just left the EU and global Britain and blah blah blah. Yeah, so that's where we're at.
Yeah, we are a long way from Jack Walker, that's for sure.
I know. Yeah.
Thank you so much. That was amazingly interesting. Really appreciate it.
All right, you're welcome.
Cheers, Matt Slater. You should read Matt's piece. It's in The Athletic and it teases out all the details of what's going on behind the scenes, and it's very worthwhile. So you'll find it in The Athletic. As I mentioned during the chat with Matt, Bayern have scored what probably will be the decisive goal of the tie. They are 1-0 up on the night in Munich, 2-0 up on aggregate. As for Spurs, let me see. Flicking on here. Still 0-0 on the night. They've just blazed a shot over, so they're 1-0 down, 64 minutes on the clock there. They have a bit more time. Højbjerg has just blasted a shot over and is trying to get the crowd going, and they're responding. They were booed at half-time, Spurs, if you're just tuning in. I mentioned they were a little bit tepid in the first half, to say the least, pedestrian. They have upped it based on the 10 seconds I've just seen now. But still 0-0, crucially, so 1-0 down on aggregate. The football show is with thanks to Sky. You can watch all the biggest live Premier League games every weekend on Sky Sports. Back in one moment.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Sky, proud partner and supporter of the Republic of Ireland women's national football team.
This is News Talk. Lunchtime Live.
Alex, do you think this redesign is a good idea?
Yes, I do actually. I do believe that, that the proposal to reconstitute